You'd have to be living under a rock, wouldn't you? Not to know that the state of Australia's education is in a pretty bad way. A disturbing new report commissioned by the Centre for Independent Studies, written by British analyst Joanna Williams, has found that a, quote, national shame produced by identity politics has overtaken Australian classrooms. Students here, she found, are increasingly being taught a black armband view of our history, with, quote, history classes increasingly focused on past wrongdoings rather than celebrating national successes. Joining me now is Associate Professor Peter Kurti, a director at the Centre for Independent Studies, who commissioned Joanna Williams' report. Peter, thank you for joining me tonight. Tell us what this report found about the state of Australian schools.
Well, it really points out the fact that increasingly our children are being taught national shame, and we're seeing that history is being used as a weapon to degrade the nation, to provoke feelings of guilt, and to really tear at any sense of Australian identity. And instead of teaching about national identity and national citizenship, children are being encouraged to think in terms of global citizenship and not to have instilled in them a sense of loyalty to the nation. So we're seeing history here being used once again as a weapon to tear at things that we consider to be important.
Peter, what she notes too, and I think this is important to put on the record, is you don't whitewash away the bad and the good, obviously, but you don't take away from our history. You analyse it and understand it warts and all. As she quotes it in the report, ignoring past atrocities leaves young people ignorant and a risk of repeating immoral acts. This is this whole revision argument about slavery, let's say. Tear down all the statues, make the slavery issue go away. But then you miss celebrating the abolitionists and those who moved against the mob and fought against their own governments to abolish slavery. I mean, these are the things you've got to understand if you don't want to repeat the mistakes of the past, surely.
Well, that's absolutely right. Every nation has dark patches in its history, and Australia is no exception. And the important thing is to teach children, when they're being taught history, to learn how to evaluate evidence and to determine historical truth according to the weight of that empirical evidence. Whereas now children are being taught that history is messy, and what they need is not the skills to evaluate evidence, but the skills to come to terms with the messiness. And that usually means decrying Australia and tearing it at its foundations and its identity. So that's absolutely right. What we need to do is to teach children to evaluate the truth about the past and to put that in the broader context concerning the country that we've become today.
So what guidance does this report give us to turn things around?
Well, it encourages us to think in terms of how we need to tackle curriculum reform and how we need to tackle the business of teaching children in the classroom and turning them into responsible citizens. The idea that you can be a global citizen without being, first of all, a citizen of your country is something that's going to weaken our democracy in the long run, and that's what Jo Williams is very concerned about in her paper. And so what we need to do is take note of these warnings and to try to ensure that the structure of the curriculum and the teaching of history in the classrooms does not try to sidestep or tear down our past and our identity, but to help children come to terms with it so that we can continue to build a better and stronger Australia for everybody.
Peter Kurti, thank you for your time. If you're interested in reading that paper, I'll put a link to it on my Instagram, Peta Credlin, AO.